I'm speaking to you from Delhi, where I've just spent a week meeting with policy advisors, think tank leaders, and government officials. What struck me most was the optimism, not naive optimism. Serious people with clear-eyed views of India's challenges, but genuine belief that India is at a turning point. As one business leader put it, India has thousands of years of history as a civilization. We're not trying to copy anyone's model. We're reclaiming what we've always been capable of. That confidence is backed by real progress. Recent growth figures show the country growing at 7.4%. Political and macroeconomic stability is clear. And India has signed up to multiple free trade agreements in recent years. Ultimately, economic freedom is improving. But I also kept noticing something else. Two pressures that are testing whether this stays on track. If you've ever wondered whether India can maintain the markets that drive growth, or whether geopolitics will push it in a different direction, this is what I learned. I'm Adam Dixon, the Adam Smith Chair and Director of Panmure House, the last home of the father of economics, Adam Smith. If you recall, in episode 1, we looked at how China succeeded through market competition. A little bit of state planning, but market competition. And how it's now seems to be potentially dismantling what worked. Today, we'll look at India, because understanding India's choices right now is essential for understanding where the global economy goes next. Here's the question. Can India maintain competitive intensity in its markets while managing China's industrial overcapacity that is flooding global markets? And the risk that liberalization, which we've seen here in India, becomes pro-business rather than pro-market. Here's what matters about India's economy. 80% of its GDP is domestic. This isn't an export-dependent economy like China became. It's more like the United States in that regard, a massive internal market that can sustain growth even when global conditions shift. With 1.4 billion people and growth running at over 7%, simple mathematics tells you India's economy is going to be enormous in the coming decades. This potential is undeniable, but potential and outcomes are different things. And that brings us to the two pressures that could determine which path India takes. China produces around 30% of global manufactured goods, while domestic consumption remains structurally weak. That massive overcapacity, which some believe is flooding world markets, is counterproductive for other economies. The numbers tell the story. China's steel exports surged 27% in 2024, after growing 35% in 2023. This isn't just steel, it's across manufacturing sectors. Solar panels, EVs, chemicals, machinery. When China's domestic demand weakens and Beijing facilitates exports through subsidies and cheap credit, global prices collapse and producers in other countries get driven out. Now, for consumers, that might be a good thing, but not for countries that are trying to industrialize. Now, countries everywhere are mobilizing geoeconomic tools, tariff subsidies, industrial policy, to counter Chinese overcapacity. India faces pressure to do the same. But here's the trap, and this goes for all countries. Defensive industrial policy rarely stays defensive. It spreads. Strategic sectors become every sector. Temporary measures become permanent protection. And you end up killing competition in the name of defending it. Now, the second pressure is domestic and a bit more subtle, but potentially more consequential. One person I spoke to framed it this way. He framed it as the distinction between pro-market and pro-business reform. And once you see this distinction, you can't unsee it. Pro-market means creating competitive conditions, enabling new entry, preventing monopolization, letting firms succeed or fail based on performance. It's about making markets work better. Pro-business, on the other hand, means protecting incumbents, giving advantages to connected firms, blocking competition, directing capital to chosen winners. It's about making specific businesses more profitable. The two can look very similar on the surface. Both involve a bit of government action, both can claim to support growth, but the outcomes can be quite different. Here's a signal that worried several people I spoke with. India's private sector is sitting on enormous amounts of cash, but not investing. Why is that? If liberalization, and there's been a lot of liberalization in recent years, if it's creating genuine market opportunities, why isn't more capital flowing? Perhaps one possibility is uncertainty about whether these reforms will create real competition or just enrich other incumbents. India's production-linked incentive scheme, the PLI, illustrates a bit of this tension quite well. PLI has created real results. Electronics production surged 146%. India went from importing mobile phones to manufacturing and exporting them. Over 1.6 trillion rupees in investment, nearly 700,000 jobs created. Perhaps the iPhone that you're watching this on was put together and assembled in India. But manufacturing as a share of GDP, it's still stuck at around 13 to 14%. For context, Vietnam's manufacturing is around 25% of GDP. South Korea's was around 30% during its rapid growth. Now, the 2014 Make in India goal was 25% by 2025. We're now in 2026, and India is not there. Now, this doesn't mean the PLI failed. Jobs and investment matter. But India, unfortunately, can't declare a victory yet. And here's the deeper question. Is the PLI creating competitive conditions? Is it enabling multiple firms to enter and compete? Or is it picking winners and directing capital to chosen companies? I'm not making any claims here. That distinction determines, though, whether growth is sustainable versus temporary, and whether those gains fade when subsidies end. Remember from episode 1, China's EV sector succeeded through cutthroat competition. Dozens of companies fighting, most failing, the best winning. That competitive intensity drove innovation and scale. Now, the risk for India is that industrial policy may protect firms from competition, that it becomes about directing capital rather than enabling markets. India faces a choice. Use policy to enable competition or use it to shield firms from competition. With 80% of domestic GDP being domestic, India has scale to maintain competition in most sectors while protecting a few strategic ones, if it should. But only if policy is designed to create competition, not just channel investment. Can schemes like PLI evolve from picking winners to enabling competitive entry? Can industrial policy create conditions for markets to work rather than replacing markets with state direction? This matters beyond India. Countries everywhere are watching China's overcapacity, feeling defensive pressure, and they're reaching for industrial policy tools. The question isn't whether to respond to geopolitics. You kind of have to. The question is whether your response maintains competitive markets or slides into crony protection. For anyone allocating capital, building supply chains, or making policy in emerging markets, or just wanting to understand the world, India is a live test case for whether industrial policy can coexist with markets. And if you want to learn more and follow more analysis like this, more frameworks for understanding global political economy, subscribe to this channel, The Strategic Economy. The optimism I heard in Delhi this week is justified, but the path matters enormously. India's journey to becoming a developed nation by 2047 requires maintaining competitive intensity in its markets. Liberalization must stay pro-market, not just pro-business. Industrial policy must create conditions for competition, not protect incumbents from it. And here's what gives me hope. India has structural advantages that China never had. It has democratic accountability, however messy, constitutional constraints on central power, a private sector with genuine autonomy. These aren't just nice-to-haves. They're guardrails that make it harder to slide into the kind of centralized control that potentially strangles China's dynamism. India isn't trying to become China. It's reclaiming thousands of years of commercial civilization, The civilization that traded across the Indian Ocean, that built great merchant networks, that understood markets long before European economies codified them. The question is whether 21st century policy will enable or stifle it. Growth comes from competition. Protection kills it. This isn't ideology, it's what the evidence shows, from China's EV sector to India's own economic history. The challenge is keeping that knowledge at the center of policy, even when geopolitics and domestic interests push in a different direction. That's the test India faces. And how India navigates it determines not just India's future, but what development model the world believes actually works. Thank you for watching.